Here is the secret routine of the Relentless. There is a window in your city that is lit before anyone else's. It belongs to someone you have probably never heard of. Not a celebrity. Not a public figure with a podcast and a motivational quotes account. Not someone whose name trends on any given morning. Just a person, ordinary looking by every available measure, who wakes in the dark and begins while the city sleeps. This person does not post about their routine. They have no interest in your admiration of it. They are not building a brand around their discipline. They are simply, without ceremony or audience, doing the work. The most dangerous person in any field is not the one you can see coming. It is the one who has been quietly building, in the dark hours, for longer than you thought possible. We live in the age of the visible routine. The 5 a.m. club with its perfectly filtered morning light. The productivity stack presented on a whiteboard for an audience of millions. The detailed breakdown of how the successful person fills every hour, offered as inspiration and received as comparison. And somewhere beneath all of that visible, curated, broadcast discipline, the discipline that is performed as much as it is practiced, there is a different kind of routine. Quieter, stranger, more specifically calibrated to the person inside it than any template could capture. This is the routine of what I will call the relentless. Not relentless in the aggressive, grinding, hustle culture sense of that word. Relentless in the original sense, without relenting, without the loosening of grip, without the concession to what is comfortable when the uncomfortable thing is the thing that matters. This is the story of Vera. If you saw Vera's daily routine written on a piece of paper, you would not think it was the routine of someone extraordinary. You might think it was boring. You might think it was obvious. You might wonder what the secret was and assume you had missed something, because what was written there seemed to promise far less than what Vera had actually built. The secret was not in the list. The secret was in what she understood about each item on it, and what she had refused, for more than a decade, to stop understanding. The fundamental misunderstanding most people carry about exceptional performance is not that they underestimate how hard the work is. They actually know it is hard. They have been told it is hard many times, and they believe it. The misunderstanding is about the location of the hard work. They imagine the hard work happening in moments of visible intensity, in the dramatic late nights before the deadline, in the heroic push when the stakes are highest, in the crisis-driven sprints that produce the deliverable, the breakthrough, the result that people see and praise. And those moments are real. They exist in the lives of extraordinary people just as they exist in everyone else's lives. But they are not where the exceptional performance was built. They are where it was expressed. The construction happens in the routine. The unglamorous, repeated, daily, unwitnessed routine. The routine that does not look like anything because it has been designed not to look like anything, to be simply what is done, without friction or decision or negotiation, because the person inside it decided long ago that it would be done and has simply been doing it since. Here is the problem with understanding this, and it is a genuine problem. The routine of a relentless person looks, from the outside, almost identical to the routine of a merely disciplined person, and only slightly different from the routine of a person who is going through the motions of a habit they once adopted and have since hollowed out. The list is the same. The actions are the same. The time slots are the same. What differs is invisible. The secret routine of the relentless is not a different list of actions. It is a different quality of attention brought to the same actions, and that quality of attention, sustained daily, produces compounding returns that the identical actions without it never will. The productivity industry has made an extraordinary amount of money selling people better lists, better systems, better apps, better morning stacks, and evening winds down and color-coded planner inserts. And people adopt them, genuinely, earnestly, with real hope. And for a few weeks they experience the brief satisfaction of a new structure. And then, gradually, the structure becomes a container they move through without presence. The action continues. The construction stops. Because the action was never the point. The action was the vehicle. And a vehicle without a driver is just an obstacle. Vera understood this. Not from a book, not from a seminar, but from a specific and clarifying failure that happened when she was 28 years old and had all the right systems and none of the right understanding. At 28, Vera had the most optimized life of anyone she knew. She had a morning routine. She had an evening routine. She had a weekly review system and a quarterly goal-setting framework and a digital second brain with more than 400 notes organized into a folder structure her productivity YouTuber had spent 3 videos explaining. She read 50 books a year. She exercised 4 times a week. She meditated. She journaled. She tracked her habits with a precision that would have satisfied a clinical researcher. And none of it was working. Not in the sense of breaking down. The systems ran. She was completing the actions. The metrics were, by every objective measure, excellent. She was doing everything right. But she was, for reasons she could not quite articulate, going nowhere. She had optimized her actions to a high degree of efficiency. What she had not examined, had not even thought to examine, because it was never part of the productivity conversation, was what she was bringing to those actions when she performed them. The clarifying failure arrived during her 3rd attempt at building a design consultancy. She had the skills. She had built a rigorous client acquisition system. She had time-blocked her calendar with surgical precision. She had, technically, everything required for the business to grow. She worked the system for 4 months and produced, at the end of it, 3 modest clients and a specific feeling of exhaustion that she could not locate in any component of her schedule. The exhaustion was not from the hours. She had tracked the hours. The hours were reasonable. She described it to a mentor, an older architect named Samuel who had built a practice over 30 years with a waiting list that stretched to 2 years, as feeling like she was moving through the work rather than being moved by it. Samuel listened. He looked at her schedule. He looked at her system. He looked at her metrics. Then he put the papers down and said, "When you sit down to work in the morning, what are you actually thinking about?" Vera said, "What I need to get done." He said, "And when you finish a session, what have you actually thought about?" A pause. Then, "How much I got done?" Samuel said, "You are managing your time. You are not spending your attention. Those are different activities, and only one of them builds anything. You are managing your time. You are not spending your attention. Those are different activities, and only one of them builds anything." Vera went home and sat with that sentence for 2 days. She thought about the morning routine she had been executing for 3 years. She thought about the reading, 50 books a year, tracked, categorized, filed into her second brain. She asked herself honestly how many of those books she had been genuinely absorbed in, versus how many she had completed as a quantity against a target. She thought about the journaling. 200 words every morning. She asked herself how many of those journal entries had contained a genuine thought versus a performed reflection that met the format requirement. She thought about the deep work blocks on her calendar, 90 minutes, twice daily, protected, and asked herself how often, in those 90 minutes, she had been genuinely in the problem versus monitoring her progress through it. The answer, in every case, was less often than she had thought. Far less. She stripped her system down to almost nothing. She removed the second brain, the tracking apps, the weekly review templates. She removed everything that had become a container she moved through without thought. What remained was 4 items, written on a single index card, carried in her jacket pocket. 1 hour of deep reading in her field every morning. Not 50 books a year. 1 hour, every morning, of genuinely difficult, genuinely engaged reading. Reading that required her to stop and think, to question, to argue with the text in the margins. 2 hours of client work every morning after the reading, with her phone in another room and the only open application the one she was working in. 1 conversation per week with someone whose thinking was better than hers in a domain she was trying to develop. One long walk, every evening, with no podcast, no phone, no content, just the movement and the thinking that movement permits. The system looked absurdly simple. It looked like less than what she had before. It was less. That was the point. Within 6 weeks, Vera noticed something she had not experienced in 3 years of optimized busyness. Her work began to interest her, not in the way of a new project's initial excitement that she had felt many times, in the way of a deepening, a growing texture in the problems she was working on, as though the problems were revealing more of themselves because she was staying with them long enough to merit the revelation. The one conversation per week produced, in 2 months, a collaboration she had not sought and could not have engineered. It emerged naturally from the quality of the conversations themselves, from the fact that she was bringing genuine thought to them rather than networking activity. The evening walks, she realized within a fortnight, were not empty. They were processing time, the integration of the day's genuine engagement, the synthesis that only happens in the absence of fresh input. Ideas arrived on the walks that did not arrive at the desk. Solutions presented themselves on the second mile that had been invisible at the keyboard. Within a year, the consultancy had 17 clients. Within 2 years, she turned away work for the first time. Within 3 years, Samuel called her to ask if she would mentor a younger designer who reminded him of someone. When she met the designer, a 26-year-old with 5 productivity apps and a second brain with 600 notes, she sat across the table and said, "Tell me, when you sit down to work in the morning, what are you actually thinking about?" And the conversation that had changed her life began again. Vera's transformation was not a motivational story. It was a neurological one. And the science that explains it is among the most practical and least communicated in the field of peak performance research. William James, the father of American psychology, wrote in 1890 that the faculty of voluntarily bringing back a wandering attention over and over again is the very root of judgment, character, and will. He did not have fMRI machines or neurotransmitter analysis. He had observation. And his observation has been confirmed with extraordinary precision by more than a century of subsequent research. Attention is not merely one resource among many. It is the resource through which all other resources are deployed. Talent without attention produces nothing. Time without attention produces busyness. Effort without attention produces exhaustion without result. And attention, unlike time, unlike talent, unlike circumstance, is trainable. It is a skill, not a trait. It can be developed deliberately, degraded by neglect, and recovered through practice. The person who brings sustained, genuine, voluntary attention to their work for 2 hours per day is not merely 2 hours more productive than the person who performs 2 hours of work with fractured, distracted, externally hijacked attention. Research by Gloria Mark at the University of California suggests the difference is multiplicative, not additive, because deep attention produces compounding insight that shallow attention cannot access even with unlimited time. Vera was not working more hours than her peers. She was working in a fundamentally different neurological state, and that state, not the hours, was the source of everything that diverged. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi spent decades studying the conditions under which human beings enter what he called flow, the state of optimal experience characterized by complete absorption, loss of self-consciousness, intrinsic motivation, and a quality of effortlessness that is paradoxically produced by deep engagement rather than by ease. Flow is not a mood. It is a neurological state. During flow, the prefrontal cortex, the seat of self-monitoring, self-criticism, and task switching, partially deactivates. The brain releases a cocktail of neurotransmitters including dopamine, norepinephrine, and anandamide that enhance pattern recognition, lateral thinking, and the formation of novel connections. Work performed in a flow state is qualitatively different from work performed outside it. Not merely faster or more enjoyable, but genuinely operating at a higher level of cognitive integration. The critical finding from Csikszentmihalyi's research for our purposes is the conditions required to enter flow. A clear challenge slightly beyond current capability, unambiguous feedback, and, most importantly, uninterrupted time with a single focus. The minimum entry time, his research suggests, is approximately 20 minutes of sustained, uninterrupted engagement before the transition into flow begins. This means that every interruption, every notification, every tap switch, every moment of self-monitoring and progress checking resets the clock. The person who checks their phone once every 20 minutes during a 2-hour work session does not experience 2 hours of flow. They experience, at best, a series of 18-minute approach runs that never quite arrive. Vera's 2 hours of uninterrupted client work, phone in another room, single application open, were not a preference. They were the minimum viable architecture for the neurological state that made the work worth doing. She was not being disciplined. She was being strategic about her own neurology. The evening walk was not, as it might appear, recovery from the day's work. It was a different kind of work, one that requires the absence of deliberate activity to occur. The default mode network is a set of brain regions that activate during rest, mind-wandering, and low-demand movement, and deactivate during focused external tasks. For decades, neuroscientists considered it the brain's idle state. A growing body of research has overturned this entirely. The default mode network, we now understand, is the brain's integration engine. It is where disparate information from different domains is combined into novel connections. It is where the problem that was unsolvable at the desk suddenly resolves during a shower. It is where long-term planning, self-reflection, and creative synthesis occur. The person who fills every available moment with input, podcasts, content, news, messages, is systematically suppressing their default mode network. They are preventing the integration that transforms information into insight. They consume more and synthesize less. They know more facts and make fewer connections. Vera's walks, deliberately empty of content, were feeding the default mode network the conditions it required. The ideas that arrived on the second mile were not arriving from nowhere. They were arriving from the processing that the previous hours of genuine engagement had loaded into the system, and that the quiet of the walk had finally allowed to complete. The final mechanism in Vera's routine was the least visible and perhaps the most powerful. She had removed the decisions. Research by Roy Baumeister on ego depletion, the finding that willpower and decision-making draw on the same finite cognitive resource, established a principle with profound practical implications. Every decision you make during the day depletes the resource available for subsequent decisions. The quality of decisions made in the morning is measurably higher than the quality of decisions made in the evening, not because of time of day per se, but because of the accumulation of decision load. Vera's index card was not a schedule. It was a decision removal system. By pre-committing to the 4 items with sufficient specificity that no decision was required at the time of execution, she preserved her cognitive resource for the actual work. There was no morning negotiation about whether to read, what to read, for how long, before or after what. There was no evening calculation about whether to walk or rest or watch something. The decisions had been made once, in clarity, and removed from daily reevaluation. This is why the routine looked simple. Not because it was simple to maintain. The consistent execution of 4 items with genuine attention, every day, across years, is not simple. But because it had been designed to require as little daily decision-making as possible, freeing the cognitive resource it would otherwise consume for the things the routine was designed to enable. 5 rules to engineer your own relentless routine. The relentless routine is not a schedule to copy. It is a set of principles to apply, specifically, precisely, to the shape of your actual life and the nature of your actual goals. Vera's 4 items were Vera's 4 items. The underlying architecture that made them work is universal. Here are the 5 rules that encode that architecture. Rule 1: Audit presence, not performance. Before redesigning your routine, audit the one you already have. But audit what you brought to it, not what you did. For 1 week, after each major work block, rate your genuine presence. 1. Going through motions. To 5. Fully absorbed. Do not rate output. Do not rate hours. Rate only the quality of your attention during the block. At the end of the week, total the scores. The number tells you not how hard you worked, but how present you were. Most people discover, on this audit, that a significant proportion of their productive time scores a 2 or a 3. The audit is not a judgment. It is a baseline. You cannot improve what you have not honestly measured. The goal of all subsequent rules is to move your weekly presence score upward, not your hours. Rule 2: Strip the system to the smallest defensible core. Identify every element of your current routine or productivity system. For each element, ask, does this require my genuine attention, or does it manage my activity without requiring my presence? Eliminate everything in the second category. Not permanently. Suspend it for 30 days. What remains is your core. The things that, if done with full attention every day, would actually move your work forward. For most people, this is between 2 and 5 items. Not 25. 2 to 5. The stripped system feels insufficient. This feeling is important and should be noted but not acted on. Insufficiency is what a load-bearing wall looks like after the decoration has been removed. It is not less. It is what was always holding everything up. Rule 3: Protect the first 2 hours like infrastructure. The first 2 hours of your working day are the highest value cognitive period you possess. They contain the largest reservoir of the decision-making and attention resources that deplete through the day. These hours should be used exclusively for your most cognitively demanding, most consequential work. Not email, not messages, not meetings, not planning. The work itself. Protect them with the same non-negotiability you would apply to a structural element of a building. If someone asks to schedule a meeting at 8 a.m., the answer is, that time is not available. You are not being difficult. You are being an engineer of your own highest output. Rule 4: Build a thinking space with no input. Schedule, daily, a period of 20 to 40 minutes with no input of any kind. No podcast, no music with lyrics, no phone, no reading. Walking is ideal. Sitting in silence works. This is not rest. This is the activation of your default mode network, your brain's integration engine. The quality of this time is directly proportional to the quality of the focused work that preceded it. Deep work loads the system. The thinking space allows the synthesis that transforms load into insight. You will feel, initially, that you are wasting time. You are not. You are doing the work that only happens in the absence of more work. The ideas that arrive in this space are not random. They are the completed processes of everything you engaged with genuinely during the day. Rule 5: Measure depth, not volume. The final rule governs how you evaluate your routine's success, and this evaluation shapes everything. Volume metrics, tasks completed, hours worked, books read, habits tracked, measure activity. Depth metrics measure something harder to quantify, but more meaningful, genuine progress on consequential work. At the end of each week, ask one question. Did I advance the work that matters most? Not, did I stay busy? Not, did I complete my list? Did the thing that matters most move forward? If yes, the week was successful regardless of how the surface metrics looked. If no, the question is not did I work hard enough, but did I spend my attention on the right thing? The relentless are not measured by their productivity. They are measured by their progress. These are not the same thing. The relentless are not relentless because they are built differently. They are relentless because they made a specific decision, once, clearly, in a moment of genuine self-knowledge, about how they would spend their attention. And then they spent it that way, day after day, not with the energy of urgency or the heat of inspiration, but with the quiet, sustainable, compounding consistency of someone who understands that the work is not an event. It is a practice, a daily practice. A practice that looks, from the outside, like almost nothing. A person at a desk in the early morning, a person walking in the evening without headphones, a person who does not check their phone during the hours that matter. And that produces, over months and years, outcomes so disproportionate to the visible inputs that the people who witness them reach instinctively for the explanation of talent or luck, or some mysterious quality that separates the exceptional from the rest. There is no mysterious quality. There is only the decision to spend your attention on what matters, made once, with full commitment, and then simply honored, quietly, daily, without requiring the occasion to feel worthy of it. The window in your city that is lit before anyone else's does not belong to someone smarter than you. It does not belong to someone with fewer responsibilities, fewer obstacles, more hours in the day. It belongs to someone who decided what their attention was for, and who has been honoring that decision, quietly and without audience, every morning since. The index card is waiting. The question is what you will write on it, and whether, once written, you will treat it as a preference or as a policy. The relentless treat it as a policy. That is the only secret.